The sun was merciless, beating down on the Mojave Desert with a heat that could melt bones. Clayton Reed, a solitary cowboy with weathered hands and quiet eyes, rode slowly across the arid land. His horse, Dusty, snorted against the dry wind. Clayton had no destination, just endless sky, jagged rocks, and silence. For years, Clayton had wandered from one dusty town to another, taking odd jobs and never staying long. The past haunted him, too many regrets, too many graves. His only peace came from the open range and the quiet that came with it. But that day, something unexpected broke the silence. Buzzards circled in the sky, their black wings slicing through the heat waves. "Something's dead or dying," Clayton muttered. He guided Dusty toward the circling birds, hand resting on the old Colt revolver strapped to his hip. As he approached a dry creek bed, his boots crunched on brittle stone. That's when he saw her. Half buried under sand and sun lay a figure, a woman, motionless, her skin burned red from the heat. Her long dark hair was tangled with dust and blood. Her dress was torn, soaked with sweat and dried blood. One arm had a deep gash running from her shoulder to her elbow. Around her neck, a beaded necklace glinted in the sun, a handmade Apache design. Clayton's breath caught. An Apache woman, out here alone. He dismounted quickly and knelt beside her. She was breathing, but barely. Her lips were cracked, her skin hot to the touch. He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and held it to her lips. She sipped weakly, her eyelids fluttering open just long enough to whisper something in Apache, a language Clayton didn't understand, but the pain in her voice needed no translation. "Easy now," he whispered, wrapping his bandana around her bleeding arm. "You're gonna be all right." But he knew she wouldn't survive another hour under the sun. Without hesitation, Clayton lifted her into the saddle and climbed up behind her, holding her steady. Dusty carried them across the desert toward a small cabin nestled in the hills, Clayton's old hideout, abandoned years ago. It wasn't much, but it would be shelter. It took over an hour to reach it. By the time they arrived, the woman had passed out again. Clayton laid her gently on a straw mattress and began cleaning the wound. She flinched in her sleep, her brow creased in pain. Clayton heated water, ground some herbs he'd learned about from an old trail medic, and did his best to treat the injury. He didn't know her name, her story, or what had happened, but he could see she'd been through hell. That night, the wind howled outside as Clayton sat beside her, wiping sweat from her brow and whispering calm words. She was strong, he could tell, but broken in ways that reminded him of himself. By dawn, she stirred. Her eyes opened wide in panic. She sat up, breathing fast, searching for something, an escape, a weapon. Clayton raised his hands. "Hey, easy, you're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, eyes narrowed, breathing like a hunted animal. He reached for the canteen slowly and offered it. She took it, her hand trembling. "Name's Clayton," he said softly. "Clayton Reed." She didn't respond, just drank. He waited. Finally, in a hoarse whisper, she spoke. "Ayanna." He nodded. "You're lucky to be alive, Ayanna." Her eyes shifted to the window. Her fingers clenched the blanket. "Men, they come, kill my people." Clayton's chest tightened. "Bounty hunters?" She nodded. "White men ride horses. They shoot my brothers, my uncle. I run. They chase. One shot me." Clayton exhaled, gripping his knees. He'd heard about these so-called hunters, paid to clear land, pacify tribes, or collect rewards on trumped-up accusations. They were merciless, greedy, and ruthless. "Do they know you survived?" Ayanna shook her head slowly. "I hide in rocks. Then, desert. You did good. You held on long enough for me to find you." Silence stretched between them for a moment. She looked at him, really looked. His worn clothes, the scar on his cheek, the eyes that held no lies. "You, not like them." "No," Clayton said, standing up to fix some broth. "I've run from men like them too." The next 3 days passed in quiet routine. Clayton boiled herbs, kept the wound clean, and made sure Ayanna stayed hydrated. She barely ate, but her strength returned little by little. By the fourth morning, she was walking around the cabin, slow but steady. Clayton was outside chopping firewood when he saw her standing by the door. "Feeling better?" She nodded. "You saved me. Why?" Clayton paused. "Because it was the right thing to do." She tilted her head. "Many men see Apache. They leave or kill. I ain't many men." She smiled just slightly and looked at the open sky. That evening they sat by the fire. Ayanna shared small pieces of her story. She was from a peaceful band of Apache who lived far from town, mostly unnoticed. They hunted, crafted tools, and tried to avoid settlers. But one day, riders came with rifles and greed. Her people resisted. The rest was smoke and blood. "I ran. I thought I would die in desert." "You almost did," Clayton said softly, "but you didn't." She glanced at him. "Why you live alone?" He didn't answer for a long time. "War," he finally said. "I fought in it. Did things I ain't proud of. Came home to nothing. Just kept riding. Didn't feel like I belonged anywhere anymore." Ayanna nodded as if she understood. Perhaps she did. The next morning, Clayton noticed something. Tracks. Several sets of hoofprints, leading near the cabin but keeping a distance. He narrowed his eyes. That night he stayed awake on the porch, rifle resting across his lap. When Ayanna woke up and saw him there, she knew. "They find me? Could be scouts, could be worse. Either way, I need to be ready." "You should leave me. I bring danger." "I already made that choice when I picked you up from that creek bed," Clayton replied. "And I don't run from danger when someone's life is on the line." She said nothing, but her expression spoke volumes: trust, fear, gratitude. Clayton spent the next day fortifying the cabin. He checked ammo, boarded windows, and dug a hidden crawl space beneath the floorboards. "We'll hide you down there if they come," he explained. "I'll handle the rest." "I fight too," Ayanna said. "Not with that wound, you don't. You stay alive, that's your fight." As night fell again, they stood outside the cabin, watching the horizon. In the distance, a flicker of torchlight. They were coming. Clayton exhaled and muttered, "Let them come." He turned to Ayanna and nodded. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The night air was thick with tension. The torchlight in the distance was no longer a flicker. It was a line of riders, moving slowly through the hills, searching. Clayton's jaw clenched as he stood on the porch of the old cabin, rifle in hand. Beside him, Ayanna stood still, her eyes narrowed like a hawk scanning the horizon. "They'll be here by morning," Clayton said. Ayanna nodded. "I fight too." Clayton turned to her, concern flashing in his eyes. "You're still healing." She reached for a knife he had kept near the door. "I healed enough." Despite the fear simmering between them, there was a sense of calm. It came not from the absence of danger, but from the presence of purpose. Two people from two different worlds had found something worth protecting: each other. The storm arrives. By dawn, the enemy had arrived. 5 riders, hardened bounty hunters armed with rifles and pistols, circled the small cabin. Their leader, a sharp-eyed brute named Miles Draven, shouted out from his saddle, "Reed, we know you're in there. We tracked Apache blood to your door. Hand her over and we might let you live." Clayton stepped out onto the porch, rifle at his side, hat low over his brow. "Can't do that." Miles scowled. "You protecting her? You know there's a bounty on her head. She killed a white rancher, they say." "She killed no one. You slaughtered her family." A pause. The other men shifted uneasily. Miles spat on the ground. "Doesn't matter. Apache's an Apache. Law don't care who drew blood first." Clayton's voice dropped cold. "Neither do I, but I won't stand by while you hunt a wounded woman like she's nothing." Miles chuckled. "You sure you want to die for her? Better than living like you." Without warning, the first shot rang out, sharp and fast. It missed Clayton by inches, striking the porch beam behind him. He rolled to cover and returned fire, his Winchester booming. The fight had begun. Gunfire and grit. Bullets tore through the wood of the cabin. Dust flew, glass shattered. Ayanna crouched behind an overturned table, clutching a small pistol Clayton had given her. She breathed deeply, staying calm, focused. Her father had taught her to shoot years ago in the safety of the Apache lands. Now those lessons would save her life. Clayton picked off one of the riders from the corner window. The man fell from his horse, a scream swallowed by the echoing desert wind. "Four left!" Clayton shouted. The men outside began to spread out, flanking both sides of the cabin. Smoke filled the room. The firewood stack behind the house burst into flames. Someone had thrown a torch. They were trying to smoke them out. "We need to get out," Ayanna shouted, covering her mouth. Clayton nodded and motioned toward the trapdoor under the table. "Go! Crawl through the tunnel. It leads to the rocks behind the cabin." "What about you?" "I'll draw them away. Go." But Ayanna refused. She touched his arm. "We leave together, or we don't leave." Clayton hesitated. Then, with a grim nod, he grabbed extra rounds and kicked open the back door. Together, they sprinted into the desert, weaving between rocks, using the smoke and terrain as cover. The riders gave chase, hooves pounding, shouts echoing. One rider spotted them and galloped ahead, pistol raised. Ayanna turned and fired. Her shot struck true. The man fell from his horse, motionless. Clayton turned to her, stunned. "Nice shot." She gave a tired smile. "My father taught me well." The cliffside showdown. Clayton and Ayanna reached a narrow canyon, a place Clayton had discovered years ago while hiding from the law. Steep cliffs rose on both sides, and the only way through was a tight passage barely wide enough for a horse. "Will we make our stand here?" Clayton said. "They'll have to come one at a time." He took cover behind a large boulder, while Ayanna positioned herself higher on a rocky ledge. Moments later, the riders appeared, riding hard into the canyon. Clayton fired first, striking another rider. The man's horse reared and threw him. Ayanna picked off another with a precise shot from above. Now only two remained, Miles and one last gunman. They dismounted and moved slowly, cautious now. These weren't scared prey. They were warriors defending something sacred. Miles called out again. "You've got guts, Reed, but you've run out of bullets and time." Clayton's voice echoed back. "You've got nothing worth living for. I do." Suddenly, Miles rushed forward, firing wildly. The last rider flanked left and threw a knife, grazing Clayton's side. Clayton staggered but held his ground. Ayanna jumped from the ledge and tackled the second gunman before he could reload. They struggled on the ground, his brute strength against her speed. He swung wildly, catching her cheek with the back of his hand. But Ayanna reached for the fallen knife, twisted, and drove it into his chest. The last shot. Clayton and Miles were now face to face, guns empty. They stared each other down, breathing hard. Miles lunged first, swinging a heavy punch that sent Clayton to the ground. Blood poured from his lip. "You threw away your life for an Apache girl," Miles sneered. "You're a damn fool." But Clayton smiled. "You're wrong. She gave me back my life." And then, from behind, Ayanna raised the fallen man's rifle and fired. Miles dropped instantly. A new dawn. The canyon was quiet now. The echo of the gunshot faded into the sky. Clayton lay on the ground, holding his side. Ayanna rushed to him, dropping the rifle and falling to her knees. "You're hit?" "Just a graze," he muttered, wincing. "Hurts like hell, though." She pressed a cloth to the wound, tears in her eyes. "You protect me," she said softly. "Now I protect you." Clayton looked up at her, smiled, and took her hand. "We're even." Weeks later, the cabin stood again, repaired and stronger. Smoke rose from the chimney, and wildflowers bloomed near the porch. Ayanna stood outside, grinding, herbs in a bowl. Clayton leaned on the rail, watching her with a quiet smile. They had buried the bounty hunters in the desert and told no one. Ayanna chose to stay. She had lost everything once, but here, with this quiet cowboy who gave up everything for her, she had found something new. Peace, love, home. Clayton no longer rode from town to town. He had found his place too, not in a saloon, not on the run, but beside a woman who had taught him that the past didn't define a man. His choices did. At night, they sat by the fire, sharing stories in broken English and Apache, laughing, healing. They were no longer alone. They were free.